prairie stretched endlessly, bathed in amber fire. Dust motes danced in the last golden rays of the dying sun, carried lazily by a wind that whispered through the tall grasses. Hawks circled in the distance, their keen eyes tracing invisible lines across the horizon, while the river's quiet murmur threaded through the valley below. Elias Carter rode along the ridge, his horse's hooves stirring the earth with rhythmic precision, each strike a heartbeat against the vast, silent sky. He spotted her before she noticed him, a figure kneeling beside a silver ribbon of river, her hands gentle against the flank of a wounded mare, hair falling like a dark waterfall over slender shoulders. The wind lifted strands, brushing them across her face. He slowed instinctively, breath catching in the space between them. Her presence struck him with a force that was equal parts mystery and magnetism. Their eyes met, and for a long heartbeat, the prairie ceased to exist. Amber light caught in her irises, mirrored by his own. The world narrowed, contracted to that instant. There was recognition without knowing, curiosity tangled with desire, a silent acknowledgement that something unspoken had begun. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into soft dust, careful not to break the spell. "Your horse? She's hurt," he said, voice low, not wanting to shatter the fragile tension. She looked up, startled but composed, eyes sharp and luminous. "I know. She wandered too close to the rocks," she murmured, voice carrying both strength and vulnerability. The slight tremor betrayed her steadiness. He knelt beside her, inspecting the wound with practiced hands. Their fingers brushed briefly, an electric jolt that made the air heavier, the prairie quieter, even the river's flow seeming to pause in respect. "You've got a gentle touch," he said, almost unconsciously, letting the words linger. She looked at him then, really looked, and in that gaze, he saw the same spark reflected. Curiosity, hunger, a question of what might be if rules were bent and hearts allowed to wander. The sun dipped lower, bleeding molten red into the sky. Shadows stretched long across the riverbank, curling around the pair like an unseen audience. The wind stilled, holding its breath, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and dust. Elias's hand found hers again, this time deliberately, fingers intertwining. No words were necessary. The world had shrunk to a single pulse, a single breath. She leaned slightly forward, and he felt it, the pull of something forbidden, irresistible. Her lips brushed his fingertips, a subtle, teasing contact that drew a shiver along his spine. Desire thrummed through him like a live wire. "Elias?" she whispered, the name a caress, though he had not introduced himself. It was as if the prairie itself had chosen the name for him, a sound that belonged only to this moment. He closed the gap before either could pull back, pressing a careful, cautious kiss to her lips. It was impulsive, a stolen spark in the dying light, tender yet charged with a heat that made his heart hammer against his ribs. The kiss lingered, a whisper of promise and danger, an unspoken confession of desire neither dared name aloud. The wind shifted suddenly, and the moment shattered as a movement in the periphery caught his eye. A shadow hidden among the tall grass, watching. Elias froze, lips still brushing hers, heart clenching with awareness. The feeling of being seen, of having their secret exposed, sent a shiver down his spine. She pulled back slightly, eyes wide, a silent question in their depths. He pressed a finger to her lips, a gesture of caution, of warning. The shadow remained, unmoving, almost patient, like a predator waiting. I should," she began, but he shook his head, a small, almost imperceptible smile on his lips, though tension lingered in his chest. "Not yet," he murmured, voice hoarse with restrained emotion. "Just a little longer." They stood there, wrapped in the dying light, each acutely aware of the forbidden nature of their connection, yet unwilling to relinquish it. The river sang beside them, the tall grasses whispered secrets, and the distant hawks seemed to circle in silent approval. Time slowed, moments stretched. The kiss had been stolen, secret, a fleeting rebellion against the world. And yet, The shadow watching reminded them that desire carried consequences, that the frontier had eyes of its own, and that secrecy was as fragile as the dust beneath their boots. Elias's hand lingered against hers, warmth radiating through the growing chill of evening. She tilted her head, lips parted slightly, inhaling the scent of him. A mixture of earth, leather, and something indefinably wild. He leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face, letting his thumb trace her jawline. Her breath caught, a soft shiver rippling through her frame. The river reflected the deepening hues of the sunset, turning liquid gold, and for a suspended heartbeat, they belonged only to each other. A hawk called from above, breaking the fragile silence. Elias pressed one more fleeting kiss to her temple, then stepped back, unwilling to cross the line further with eyes upon them. The tension lingered like a perfume, thick and intoxicating. "We should go," she whispered, voice trembling between desire and fear. He nodded, though his gaze stayed on hers a moment longer than decorum allowed. "I'll see you again," he promised, the words carrying weight beyond their meaning. A vow and a plea rolled into one. As they parted, shadows deepened. The sun's last ember sank below the horizon, leaving the prairie in twilight, a canvas of indigo and rose. The shadow that had watched them retreated silently, leaving only the faintest trace of being, a reminder that secrets had a way of breathing beyond the bounds of their own hearts. Elias mounted his horse, fingers still tingling with the memory of her touch. The horse stirred, muscles rippling under his weight, and the world seemed impossibly large, infinitely empty, yet charged with the memory of a kiss stolen, of desire whispered beneath the dying sun. She lingered by the river a moment longer, eyes following him, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and longing. Her fingers brushed the spot where his lips had touched hers, and she could still feel the heat, the pull of something forbidden, something inevitable. The prairie night settled, stars beginning to pierce the violet sky. The wind carried with it a scent of wet earth and the river's silver, a reminder that moments, once stolen, could not be unmade. Somewhere in the distance, the hawks vanished, leaving silence. Yet within that silence, a heartbeat echoed. Theirs. In the quiet, she whispered his name again. A prayer, a promise, a curse of longing all at once. And somewhere beyond the horizon, Elias felt it too. The pull of a desire that would not be denied. The knowledge that this was only the beginning of something that neither could stop, no matter the shadow that lingered, watching, waiting. Twilight deepened. The river mirrored the stars. The prairie held its breath. And in the space between them, the first, forbidden kiss burned. A secret no one could take away, yet one that carried its own perilous weight. The wind rustled through the grasses, carrying whispers of longing, of mystery, and the fragile beginnings of a love that dared to risk everything. And in the quiet, both knew. The frontier had seen many things, but none like this. None as consuming, none as secret. The prairie night wrapped the world in silver shadows, moonlight spilling across rippling grass, catching the glint of dew on horse hooves. Campfires flickered here and there, small islands of warmth and light in a vast ocean of stillness. Elias rode quietly, heart attuned to the whisper of the wind, the soft call of distant coyotes, and the echo of that stolen kiss from yesterday's dying sun. He found her waiting by a bend in the river, the water reflecting the pale glow of the moon like scattered diamonds. Her figure was delicate, framed by the silver haze of night, hair loose and shining, a simple shawl draped across her shoulders. She turned as he approached, lips parting in a smile that sent warmth blooming straight through him. "Elias," she breathed, a sound that belonged only to this moment, carried on the wind between them. "Clara," he murmured, dismounting with careful slowness, hands brushing against hers when she extended them. The contact was brief, almost hesitant, yet electricity passed between them, invisible but undeniable. The world shrank until there was only river, firelight, and the gentle rhythm of two hearts in quiet collision. They walked slowly along the bank, the soft sound of water lapping against rocks beneath their feet. The night was alive with subtle fragrances, Wet earth, pine, the sharp tang of river water. The stars above seemed to lean closer, as if eager witnesses to the secret meeting unfolding below. Clara bent to adjust a loose strap on his saddle, and his hand lingered near hers, brushing the backs of her fingers with a light, lingering touch. She looked up, eyes catching his, and the smile that formed was shy, tentative yet daring. "You ride well," she said softly, words almost lost to the night. "And you tend to horses with skill," he replied, voice low, teasing only slightly. Their eyes danced, the unspoken dialogue between them richer than any conversation. Desire simmered beneath the surface, quiet yet persistent, like a fire awaiting air. They paused near a fallen log, sitting side by side. The warmth from her body seeped into him, a tender, intimate gravity he could not resist. Silence stretched comfortably between them, filled only with the rustle of grass, the murmur of water, and the occasional crackle of a distant fire. "I never thought I'd find this," he said finally, words slow and deliberate, as if tasting each one. Clara turned to him, eyes glimmering. "This?" she asked, the word fragile, teasing, electric. "The feeling," he said, hesitant yet certain, "of being seen, truly." Her gaze softened, and she shifted slightly, leaning closer, the warmth of her shoulder pressing against his. "I know," she whispered. "It's rare, isn't it?" "Yes," he admitted, fingers brushing against hers again, this time deliberately entwining. It was a small act, yet monumental, a private rebellion against the rules of a world that had yet to forgive desire born in secret. The moon climbed higher, silver light bathing them in ethereal glow. She leaned her head on his shoulder, a simple act, yet one that carried volumes. The wind carried her scent, lavender and the crisp tang of river water, and he inhaled deeply, savoring the intimacy, the closeness, the quiet that belonged only to them. They shared stories then, low voices blending with the night. Clara spoke of roads traveled, of towns glimpsed, of people met and lost. Elias shared tales of the prairie, of horses and storms, of sunsets that had burned across the plains and left him restless for company. Laughter rose softly between them, fragile and sweet, a counterpoint to the tension that still lingered in the air. Hands brushed often, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. Each touch sent shivers of longing, gentle waves of desire, building a quiet anticipation that neither dared voice aloud. Her gaze lingered on him, lingering longer than propriety allowed, as if memorizing the shape of his face in the silver glow. At one point, she reached for his hand fully, holding it against hers as the moonlight kissed their joined fingers. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if there were no rules?" she asked, voice barely above the rustle of grass. He tilted his head, studying her in the glow, heart hammering against ribs. "Every day," he admitted. "Every night." The confession hung in the air, heavy, full of longing. She smiled softly, a slow, quiet curve that spoke more of desire than words could. The wind seemed to still, holding its breath as if waiting for the next move, the next whispered secret, the next step toward the inevitable. They rose, hands still intertwined, moving closer to the river's edge where moonlight danced on ripples. She turned to face him, a soft laugh escaping her lips, nervous yet daring. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, letting his fingers linger at her jawline, thumb tracing the gentle curve of her cheek. A kiss followed, hesitant at first, tasting the night, tasting the danger, tasting the quiet thrill of secrecy. The world narrowed to the two of them, a cocoon of desire against the vastness of the prairie. The river murmured beside them, a silver witness, and for a heartbeat, eternity existed only there, between lips, between hands, between hearts. They pulled back slightly, foreheads touching, breaths mingling, hearts hammering in unison. "We shouldn't yet," she whispered, a shiver running through her. "No," he agreed, voice low, hoarse with restrained emotion. "But we will. Soon." The night deepened, Shadows stretched long across the riverbank. Every glance, every brush of skin carried meaning. A private language built on trust, longing, and forbidden desire. Their laughter returned, softer now, edges softened by intimacy. Elias traced a hand along her back as they walked slowly back toward the campfire-lit tents. The heat of the flames played across their faces, and the flicker reflected in their eyes, 1,000 unspoken words glowing in each glance. The night was theirs alone, though secrecy hung like a thin veil, reminding them of the shadow that might still watch, somewhere, unseen but present. When they finally parted, lingering touches and shared glances promised more. More stolen moments, more whispers under silver skies, more kisses in secret corners of the prairie. Their hearts beat fast, tethered across the distance of a few steps, suspended in the thrill of intimacy only the night could allow. Clara disappeared into her tent, leaving Elias staring into the dark, moonlight glinting off the river, imagining her there, imagining her smile, imagining the warmth of her hand in his. Desire lingered like smoke, subtle yet insistent, curling through his thoughts, refusing to fade. The wind carried soft sounds of the prairie night. Rustling grass, distant river murmurs, a coyote's lonely cry. All of it seemed to echo the rhythm of two hearts daring to love in secret. Elias settled by his own fire, the warmth comforting but not enough to still the ache inside him. He closed his eyes, remembering the feel of her hand, the tilt of her head, the brush of her lips against his. Each memory was a spark, a promise, a whisper of a love that dared to be born beneath the silent skies. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows, the prairie kept watch, holding its breath as a secret flame of desire and intimacy grew brighter, quietly consuming everything around it. For now it was theirs alone, fleeting, fragile, yet utterly alive. The night pressed on, vast and unending, but within its silver glow, two hearts beat as one, moving ever closer toward a future carved in whispers, stolen kisses, and the endless hush of love beneath silent skies. The prairie awoke under a muted dawn, soft fog curling like smoke along the golden fields. Horse hooves left delicate prints in the damp earth, their echo faint, swallowed quickly by the stillness. Elias rose with the first whisper of light, the memory of Clara pressed against him like a phantom warmth. Last night's moonlit laughter and stolen touches lingered, heavy and sweet, yet beneath the comfort, a quiet unease pulsed. He mounted his horse and rode toward the river, the world veiled in mist, each breath curling like silver smoke. Clara waited where the fog clung thickest, hair damp with dew, eyes scanning the horizon. The moment their gazes met, relief softened his chest. She smiled, though there was a shadow to it, a hesitation he could not place. "Morning," he greeted, voice low, careful, reading the subtle tremor in her posture. "Morning," she replied softly, hands brushing the horse's mane. Her gaze lingered across the misty prairie before settling on him, but the warmth that had marked their nights now wavered, replaced with something unreadable. They rode together in silence, the fog swallowing sound, leaving only the rhythmic beating of hooves and the faint murmur of the river nearby. Elias studied her, noting the way her eyes darted occasionally toward the distant tree line, the way her fingers clenched momentarily around the reins. Something unspoken pressed between them, a tension he could not yet name. By mid-morning, they reached a bend in the river where the mist thinned, revealing sunlight sparkling on gentle ripples. Clara dismounted first, then offered her hand. He took it, feeling the tremor of her grip beneath his. Did you sleep well?" he asked, voice careful, probing yet gentle. Her lips curved into a small, practiced smile. "I did," she replied, though her eyes betrayed something else. An undercurrent, a fleeting shadow of thought that she kept carefully hidden. They tended the horses side by side, working in silent synchrony. Elias noticed her gaze flicker toward a folded piece of paper tucked within her satchel, her fingers brushing it almost nervously before she stowed it again. His intuition prickled. She sensed him watching and offered a soft, fleeting smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Is everything all right?" he asked, not wanting to push yet compelled to know. Clara shook her head slightly. Yes, just old memories, she murmured, though the hesitation in her tone spoke louder than the words themselves. Elias studied her profile, the way the morning sun gilded her hair, illuminating both beauty and mystery. He wanted to reach out, to brush away the unease that clung to her like mist. Yet he held back, unsure where the line between concern and intrusion lay. The day unfolded with quiet tasks, checking fences, mending a broken gate, but beneath every movement, a subtle tension lingered. Words fell easily enough, laughter rose briefly and softly, yet shadows threaded through the warmth of their connection. Every glance, every touch carried double weight, both reassurance and quiet warning. By afternoon, Clara excused herself to the riverside again, ostensibly to tend her horse, but Elias noticed the way her hands trembled slightly as she reached into her satchel. There, a folded letter, its edges worn, the ink faint. She glanced over her shoulder, cautious, as if the prairie itself had ears, and quickly slipped the note back into place. Elias's pulse quickened. He wanted to ask, to know, to pull the truth from her lips, but restraint tethered him. He could feel the weight of unspoken words hanging like low clouds over their afternoon. Desire still hummed beneath the surface, the pull between them undeniable, but curiosity and unease gnawed at the edges of intimacy. Later, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, shadows lengthening across the riverbank, a horse's distant hoofbeats startled them. A stranger approached, dust trailing behind him, eyes narrowed, carrying a message that neither could yet decipher. Clara tensed immediately, hands gripping the reins, her lips pressing together as though holding back the storm of her thoughts. Elias rode beside her, senses alert. The man stopped, tipping his hat, revealing a weathered face and a letter in hand. Clara's breath hitched. The letter, he realized instantly, was meant for her. The words she had tried to hide, the connections she had guarded, were now visible, exposed in the quiet light. She accepted it with trembling hands, careful not to let him see its contents. Yet Elias felt the weight of it, the subtle shift in her demeanor, the pause that spoke volumes. A secret, he realized, had always lingered, even as desire had grown and intimacy blossomed. They rode back toward camp in silence. Every glance, every touch carried questions unasked. Clara's hand brushed against his, soft, fleeting, yet her eyes were elsewhere, haunted by something beyond his reach. Elias's heart clenched, a mix of longing and unease threading through his desire. That evening, by the dim glow of the campfire, the tension found its way into their quiet moments. Elias studied her, noting how her hands lingered near her satchel, how her gaze sometimes drifted toward the horizon as though expecting a shadow to appear. Desire pulsed beneath the surface, strong, urgent, yet it now mingled with doubt and the faint ache of mistrust, not toward him but toward the secrets she carried. "Clara?" he said softly, breaking the silence, voice almost a whisper against the crackling fire. "You don't have to hide from me." Her lips pressed together, eyes lowering, and for a moment, the night held its breath. Then she raised her gaze, meeting his with a quiet honesty that trembled with fear and longing. "Some things are complicated," she admitted. Elias nodded slowly, hands brushing hers once more, a gesture of comfort, of promise. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together," he murmured. They sat in silence, listening to the river's soft murmur, letting the night enfold them, letting desire and doubt coexist, fragile and real. In those moments, intimacy grew, not the easy warmth of stolen kisses alone, but the deeper connection born of shared vulnerability, of understanding and restraint, of two hearts daring to trust even when shadows lingered. As midnight approached, the stars scattered across the sky like scattered embers. They finally allowed themselves to rest closer, shoulders brushing, fingers entwined, breathing synchronized. Desire hummed quietly beneath their restraint, promising more, a slow burn that neither shadow nor secret could extinguish. But the prairie, vast and patient, held its own. Somewhere beyond the firelight and mist, whispers of past deeds and unseen eyes waited. The tension between longing and doubt threaded every glance, every touch, weaving a subtle web that would pull taut in time. The night deepened. The river shimmered silver under the moon. Their hearts, caught between desire and suspicion, beat in rhythm with the pulse of the prairie, fragile yet insistent. And though secrets lingered in the corners, though shadows whispered of unspoken truths, the connection between them remained undeniable. A promise held in fingertips, in glances, in the shared warmth of breath and presence. As Elias watched her finally relax, leaning slightly into him, he knew the truth. The path ahead would not be simple. Desire could not erase secrets. Intimacy could not banish shadows. Yet, for this night, under the silent skies, with the river murmuring at their feet, they allowed themselves to believe in the fragile beauty of trust, in the quiet power of connection, and in the first stirrings of love that refused to be denied. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering light across their intertwined hands. Desire hummed beneath, strong, patient, waiting. Shadows lingered, yes, but so did possibility. And in the quiet, beneath the watchful moon, they knew whatever came next, whatever secrets rose to the surface, this bond, fragile yet fierce, could not be broken. The prairie night deepened, silver and infinite, and within it, two hearts beat in unison, suspended between longing and unease, between the whisper of a secret and the promise of love yet to fully bloom. Dawn broke over the canyon cliffs like molten fire spilling into the valley below. Blood-red light bled across the sky, casting jagged shadows over the prairie and the river that had carried their whispers, their secrets, and their desires. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of dust and sage, twisting it through the stillness. Elias rode along the ridge, heart heavy, unaware that the fragile cocoon of their stolen moments had already begun to unravel. Clara was near the riverbank, gathering herbs for her morning routine, when the first wave of chaos struck. A distant shout carried across the water, startling birds into sudden flight. The shadows of the canyon walls seemed to shiver, anticipating the storm that was about to break. Before either could comprehend, a figure emerged from the tall grasses, a friend, trusted by both, yet eyes wide with shock, mouth trembling. In his hands, he held the proof of their secret, a photograph of their last kiss, captured in a fleeting, intimate moment that neither had intended to share. Elias froze, the horse beneath him shifting nervously. The world contracted, pulse quickening, as if the very canyon held its breath. Clara's face paled, eyes wide, lips parted in a silent gasp. Desire, still simmering from nights under the moonlit skies, collided violently with shame, fear, and heartbreak. What? Elias's voice was low, ragged, almost a growl against the sudden storm of revelation. The friend's gaze flickered between them, hesitant yet inexorable. I saw. His words trembled, carrying a weight that neither could ignore. Clara's hands trembled at her sides, fingers curling into the folds of her shawl. Elias, she whispered, voice small, vulnerable, yet pleading. It wasn't supposed to, but the world had shifted. The prairie, vast and indifferent, had become a stage for exposure, a place where whispers could no longer remain hidden. The photograph in that hand was more than paper. It was a dagger, slicing through the fragile intimacy they had nurtured beneath the silver skies. Elias's chest tightened. His mind raced. Anger, betrayal, and helplessness colliding. The desire that had thrummed so gently through the night now tangled with shock and fury. He dismounted swiftly, boots crunching against the stony earth, eyes locked on the intruder and the evidence held in trembling hands. Why? He demanded, voice cutting through the still morning air. Why would you? The friend flinched, guilt and confusion warring across his face. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to what? Elias's hands clenched at his sides, the heat of his anger rippling through him. Expose something sacred? Something private? Clara stepped forward, trembling, reaching for him. Elias, it's not his fault. I should have. No, he interrupted, voice tight, eyes fierce. This isn't just about blame. It's about what's been shattered. His gaze fell to the river, shimmering silver beneath the rising sun. What we thought was ours isn't safe anymore. The canyon echoed their voices, carrying the tension across ridges, bouncing off cliffs, turning the quiet prairie into a crucible of shock and heartbreak. The friend lowered the photograph, shame flickering in his eyes. I didn't know you two. I didn't know. Clara's hands shook as she reached for Elias, a plea in every movement. Please, don't let this ruin. But Elias pulled back, distance forming instantly, a chasm between them. The fire of desire that had burned so brightly only yesterday now flickered weakly beneath the shadow of exposure. The intimacy they had nurtured, delicate and fragile, lay vulnerable to judgment, to eyes that should never have seen, to consequences they had not imagined. A hawk called from the cliffs, its cry sharp, a lament for what had been lost before it could fully bloom. The wind tore through the canyon, rustling the grasses, carrying away the fragile traces of trust and leaving in its wake the harsh clarity of reality. Clara's eyes glistened, tears threatening, as she searched his face for the man who had held her hand beneath moonlight, who had shared whispers and touches that had no audience but the stars. Elias's jaw tightened, fingers brushing unconsciously against the scar where he had once grazed her wrist. A reminder of a night both tender and forbidden. She began, voice catching. I never meant for anyone to see. It was only us. He shook his head, the motion slow, deliberate, heavy with emotion. It doesn't matter what you meant, he said, voice quiet yet edged with pain. It matters that it's seen, that it's known, that it can't be undone. The river murmured beside them, indifferent, carrying silver light over smooth stones, unaware of the storm of emotion it reflected. The prairie itself seemed to hold its breath, the tall grasses trembling as if anticipating the heartbreak that would follow. Clara's hands fell to her sides, the warmth between them of recent nights now replaced with tension, distance, the raw ache of shame. Elias, please, she whispered, don't let it change us. But the world had already changed. Every glance carried the memory of exposure, every thought tangled with the knowledge that secrecy could no longer protect them. Desire had met its harshest test, revelation, and with it, heartbreak had arrived, silent yet merciless. Elias turned his gaze to the rising sun, golden light spilling across canyon walls, and felt the weight of the frontier pressing down. The intimacy of their shared nights, the stolen kisses, the whispered confessions beneath the silver skies, all lay exposed to consequences neither could control. Clara stepped closer, trembling, reaching for his hand, and he allowed it briefly, a fleeting anchor in the turbulent current of emotion. I never wanted this, she murmured. I only wanted us. I know, he said finally, voice breaking, a mixture of longing, despair, and disbelief. I know. But wanting isn't enough when the world intrudes, when trust is fractured before it could fully form. For a long moment, they stood there, hands brushing, hearts aching, as the wind tore across the canyon, carrying with it the harsh truth. Love, no matter how deep, could be wounded by exposure, by witnesses, by a world unready to keep secrets. And yet, beneath the shock, beneath the heartbreak, a spark lingered, a fragile ember of desire and connection that refused to die completely. Elias saw it in Clara's eyes, a plea for understanding, a call to remember the nights beneath moonlight, the laughter by the river, the warmth of fingers intertwined. The prairie seemed to sigh around them, grasses bowing under the wind, river shimmering, cliffs glowing with the first full light of day. The revelation had shattered the fragile cocoon of secrecy, yet within that ruin, the potential for resilience glimmered, quiet, waiting. Elias exhaled, long and slow, the tension in his body refusing to release fully. We'll have to rebuild, he said, voice hoarse, a mixture of resolve and pain. Clara nodded, lips trembling. Together, He hesitated, then nodded. Together, he confirmed, though the weight of heartbreak lingered, pressed between them like the vast canyon itself. The morning deepened, casting long shadows across the river and prairie. The sun climbed higher, illuminating both beauty and consequence. Desire remained, simmering beneath the ache of exposure, underlined now by the stark awareness that passion and secrecy had a price. And somewhere beyond the cliffs, unseen yet present, the prairie held witness to heartbreak, longing, and the fragile resilience of a love tested by revelation. By noon, the wind had calmed, leaving quiet in its wake. Elias and Clara moved slowly, carefully, aware of the fragility of trust, of desire, of intimacy now exposed. Every glance, every touch carried weight. Every step forward was tentative, a negotiation between passion and consequence. And still, beneath the heartbreak, beneath the shock of revelation, a whisper lingered, a memory of stolen kisses, of nights beneath silent skies, of hearts daring to love even when the world intruded. The prairie held its breath, and within that vast silence, Elias felt a single stubborn truth. Even broken, even exposed, even tested, desire endured. And love, though wounded, could survive if they dared to hold it, cautiously, tenderly, against the harshness of dawn. The midday sun hung like a relentless eye over the prairie, scorching the earth with unyielding heat. Dust rose in restless swirls, catching in the hot wind that swept across fences and fallen logs, across the riverbank where hearts had once met in whispered secrecy. Elias rode hard, boots digging into the stirrups, eyes scanning the horizon for the figure he knew would challenge him, would force the storm from simmering embers into full blaze. Clara waited at the edge of the camp, hair swept back by the wind, lips pressed together in a thin line. Her eyes, once soft with desire, now burned with tension, anger, and unresolved fear. The revelation of the secret kiss had fractured the delicate fabric of trust they had woven, and now the weight of consequences pressed down like the midday sun. A shout carried across the prairie, sharp, raw. Another voice answered, tense and accusing. The friend who had revealed the photograph stood at the edge of the ridge, his presence heavy, uncertain. Behind him, a crowd of onlookers had gathered, whispers curling like smoke in the heat, eager for scandal, unaware that their eyes were about to ignite the fragile threads of intimacy that remained. Elias dismounted slowly, hand brushing the revolver at his hip, not for violence, though the gesture spoke volumes, but as a reminder that the frontier demanded caution, that passions, once inflamed, could cut deeper than any blade. "Elias," Clara said softly, stepping closer, voice trembling. "Don't." But he was already moving, words sharp and low. "You showed them," he said, eyes locked on the friend. "You brought this into the open, into their hands." The man began, hands raised in helplessness. "I didn't mean—" "No," Elias snapped, voice carrying across the plain, startling birds into flight. "You didn't mean to, but you did. And now—" His gaze swung to Clara, burning yet pained. "Now we pay the price." The wind whipped at the edges of their clothing, lifting dust and scattering loose straw, as though the prairie itself conspired to mirror the chaos. Clara's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of frustration, shame, and desire still lingering beneath the surface. "It's not just him," she said, voice breaking. "We both—" Elias turned sharply, anger and longing wrestling in his chest. "We both what?" he demanded. "Shared something forbidden? Loved each other in secret? Yes. But love isn't enough when the world intrudes, Clara." The words struck her, yet beneath the pain, a spark of defiance remained. "Then we fight for it," she said, voice steadying, eyes meeting his with raw intensity. "If desire and trust mean anything, we fight. Not against each other, but against those who would tear us apart." Elias's chest rose and fell rapidly, heat and tension tangling like wildfires across his nerves. He wanted to pull her close, to feel her warmth and silence the storm in his heart. Yet restraint held him, tethering desire to consequence. A figure stepped forward from the gathered onlookers, face contorted with anger, a weapon flashing briefly in sunlight. A challenge, a threat, a provocation. Dust swirled, wind twisted, and suddenly the prairie felt smaller, narrower, hotter, every heart in it pulsing with tension and rage. Elias squared his shoulders. "If anyone wants to test me," he said, voice low and steady, "they'll find I defend what's mine." The hours that followed were a tense standoff. Accusations flew like sparks from flint, each word aflame, each gesture loaded with history, loyalty, and betrayal. Clara remained by his side, a quiet anchor amidst the chaos. Yet the distance born of shame and exposure lingered between them. Desire hummed beneath the surface, insistent, impatient, yet tempered by the awareness of danger, of eyes that watched too closely, of hearts that could be broken with a single misstep. By late afternoon, dust storms rose from the prairie, curling in golden, suffocating waves. The sun baked the land, scorching both earth and emotion. Elias and Clara moved through the turmoil together, hands brushing, shoulders occasionally touching. A reminder that even in anger, even in confrontation, their bond endured. At one point, Elias found himself confronting the friend who had exposed them. Voices low but fierce, they argued under the unrelenting sun, the prairie wind carrying tension like smoke. "You've destroyed our peace," Elias said finally, teeth clenched. "You've turned a private moment into a spectacle. How could you betray trust so easily?" "I didn't know it mattered," the man said, almost pleading. I thought it was nothing." "It was everything," Elias replied, voice hard, tinged with heartbreak. "Everything." Clara watched silently, her own anger flaring, tempered by desire. She stepped closer, placing a hand on Elias's arm, grounding him, anchoring him amidst the rising chaos. "It's done," she murmured. "Now we decide. Do we let this burn us, or do we survive it?" The heat of the afternoon pressed upon them, sweat and dust mingling on their skin. The prairie seemed to quake with unspoken emotion, every shadow and ripple of heat mirroring the turmoil within. Desire burned still, raw and urgent, intertwined with the sting of betrayal, yet tempered by the stubborn truth that love endured, even when tested. Evening crept slowly across the horizon, the sun dipping low, casting long, red-golden shadows. Confrontation ebbed into tense conversations, heated debates, and finally, fragile truces. Elias and Clara remained close, eyes locked, hands occasionally brushing, hearts still tethered to each other amidst the scattered wreckage of anger and exposure. As twilight settled over the prairie, the wind softened, carrying scents of sage and distant pine. They walked together along the riverbank, boots sinking into cool sand, water whispering over smooth stones. The earlier fire of anger cooled into quiet, smoldering embers, desire and longing threading back into the fragile space between them. Clara stopped, turning to face him, eyes glimmering in the dying light. "We're still here," she said softly, voice trembling yet resolute. "Even after all this." Elias cupped her face gently, thumb brushing over her cheek, tracing the line of warmth that had never left him, that even anger and exposure could not erase. "Yes," he murmured, "we're still here, and nothing, no betrayal, no anger, can take that from us. Not if we fight for it." She leaned into his hand, closing her eyes, letting the lingering warmth of desire and trust seep back into her. "Then fight we will," she whispered, the promise echoing across the river, across the plains, into the settling shadows of the prairie. Night fell finally, cool and quiet, stars blinking into existence. The prairie, scorched and wild, held its breath, carrying the weight of the day's anger, confrontation, and moral reckoning. Yet beneath it all, a stubborn ember remained, desire, intimacy, and the fragile, unyielding bond between two hearts daring to love, even amidst the storm. Elias and Clara settled by the campfire at last, the heat comforting, protective. Their hands found each other, fingers intertwining, lingering touches more meaningful after the trials of the day. Desire hummed softly beneath the surface, no longer impulsive but tempered by conflict, sharpened by the fires of confrontation. They shared quiet words, whispers of hope, gentle reassurances carried on the warm prairie wind. Even as the world had tested them, tried to fracture trust, they discovered something unexpected. The depth of their connection, resilient even when exposed to anger, betrayal, and moral dilemmas. The night deepened. Moonlight reflected on the river, shimmering silver over the smooth stones. The prairie, once scorching and tense, now held a softer beauty, cradling the promise of tomorrow. Desire, intimacy, and the fragile strength of love endured, pressing against the edges of fear and anger. As they lay side by side beneath the vast prairie sky, fingers entwined, breath mingling, Elias whispered against her hair, "No matter the fire, no matter the storm, we survive. Together." Clara turned to him, eyes glistening, lips brushing his cheek. "Together," she echoed. A vow, a promise, a quiet rebellion against the harshness of the world. The stars shimmered above, the river murmured softly beside them, and the prairie held witness to the endurance of love. Even when hearts were tested, even when passion collided with anger and betrayal, desire persisted, delicate yet unyielding, blazing quietly beneath the silent skies. And in that fragile, quiet moment, they understood. The frontier could scorch, could challenge, could expose, but it could not extinguish the ember that burned between them. Twilight draped the prairie in soft violet and gold. The horizon softened by the lingering heat of day. The river shimmered like molten silver beneath the fading sun, each ripple a quiet witness to the emotional tempests of the past days. Elias rode slowly, boots brushing against the stirrups, eyes scanning the horizon for the familiar figure that had been the anchor of his heart. Clara waited at the bend of the river where they had first shared stories beneath the moon. She was poised yet vulnerable, a mixture of strength and fragile beauty, hair catching the soft wind, shawl clinging gently to her shoulders. When their eyes met, a quiet understanding passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the trials endured, the anger faced, and the truths yet to be spoken. "Elias," she whispered, voice carried on the gentle breeze. He dismounted, letting the reins slip into his hands, heart pounding with a mixture of desire and relief. "Clara," he said, his voice low, deliberate, threading through the calm of the twilight. "We need to speak. Everything needs to be laid bare." Clara nodded, stepping closer, the tips of their fingers brushing briefly. It was a small touch, almost accidental, yet it ignited a warmth that chased away the remnants of tension, replacing it with longing and the promise of intimacy restored. They sat on the riverbank, the grass soft beneath them, the water murmuring a gentle accompaniment to their conversation. Clara reached for the letter she had tried so hard to hide, sliding it into Elias's hands. The words on the paper were simple yet profound. A confession, an explanation, a revelation that clarified misunderstandings and illuminated hidden truths. "I should have told you sooner," she admitted, eyes downcast, lips trembling. "I feared your judgment, feared the consequences. But the truth, it's only fair you know it now." Elias's gaze softened, tracing the curve of her jaw, the tilt of her head. He read the words slowly, deliberately, feeling the weight of her honesty wash over him. Each line cleared a shadow that had lingered, lifting the fog of doubt and unease that had clouded their hearts. "It's done," he said finally, voice low but steady. "The secrets, the shadows, they can't touch us anymore. Not if we choose this, if we choose us." Clara looked up, eyes glistening, and smiled softly, the first true, unguarded smile in days. "Us?" she echoed, voice trembling yet full of conviction. The river's gentle flow mirrored the renewal between them. Desire, which had simmered under fear and doubt, now rose unimpeded, tempered by understanding and trust. They leaned toward each other, foreheads touching, breath mingling, and the first kiss came slowly, deliberately, a reaffirmation of connection, a celebration of honesty restored. The wind carried whispers of forgiveness across the prairie, rustling the grass, tracing patterns of light and shadow over their intertwined hands. The hardships of anger and betrayal had tempered their longing, deepening the passion and emotional intimacy that had begun under the moonlit skies. Elias traced a hand along her arm, fingers lingering on the warmth of her skin, each touch a promise, each caress a reaffirmation of the bond that had been tested and survived. Clara leaned into his touch, sighing softly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders, letting desire return without fear. As the evening deepened, the sky painted itself in pastels of purple, pink, and gold, the soft light a balm to hearts still tender from confrontation. They walked along the riverbank, hands entwined, sharing quiet words and laughter that felt sweeter after the days of turmoil. "I feared we'd lost it," Clara admitted softly, her gaze on the water, reflections of stars beginning to shimmer. "I feared the trust we built. I feared you might turn away." Elias's hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing over the soft curve. "Never," he said simply. "Not for anything. Desire brought us together, yes, but honesty, trust, and courage keep us here." Night fell fully, stars spilling across the sky in vast clusters of silver and gold. The prairie breathed around them, silent yet alive, carrying the subtle scents of sage, river, and distant pine. Elias and Clara lay together beneath a blanket of stars, the cool night air a contrast to the warmth of their bodies pressed close, fingers entwined, hearts beating in quiet unison. They spoke of dreams, of future rides across the prairie, of nights beneath endless skies, and the freedom to love openly, without fear. Desire hummed beneath their skin, no longer tinged with uncertainty, now a steady, insistent warmth that drew them closer, binding them with threads of intimacy, trust, and longing. Elias brushed a lock of hair from her face, lips tracing her jawline in a gentle, lingering touch. Clara leaned into him, soft sighs mingling with the gentle murmur of the river. The night became a sanctuary, a place where passion and trust intertwined, where the mistakes of the past became lessons rather than chains. Time seemed suspended, the prairie holding its breath as if honoring the renewal of love. Desire, once complicated by shadows, now flowed freely, a quiet, insistent fire beneath the soft moonlight. Every touch, every whispered word, every glance held meaning, weaving together the threads of intimacy that had survived anger, betrayal, and doubt. In the quiet hours, they explored each other slowly, gently, savoring the intimacy of hands on skin, the soft brush of lips, the electric connection of breath and heartbeat. Every movement was deliberate, every sigh a note in the symphony of their shared desire. Elias held her close beneath the moon's silver glow, whispering words of affection, of longing, of enduring love. Clara responded in kind, her hands tracing the lines of his face, her lips finding his in kisses that spoke of trust renewed, of intimacy reclaimed, of passion tempered by understanding. The prairie night stretched on, vast and infinite, yet within that expanse, they found a world of their own. Desire flowed like the river, constant and unending, carrying with it the depth of emotion that had grown from whispered confessions, from shared vulnerability, from the resilience of love that refused to be extinguished. When they finally rested, bodies entwined beneath the soft blanket of twilight and stars, the world outside seemed distant, irrelevant. In each other's arms, they discovered the power of honesty, the strength of trust, and the beauty of a love tested by fire and proven enduring. The night was quiet, the river shimmering with reflected stars, and the prairie held witness to their reunion, to the quiet justice of truth revealed, and to the tender intimacy of two hearts fully aligned. Desire lingered, insistent yet gentle, a soft fire that promised more love, more connection, more whispered moments beneath the silent skies. Elias brushed his lips against her temple, murmuring, "We endure, together." Clara's lips curved into a smile, eyes closed, content, and she whispered back, "Together." And so the prairie night carried them in its quiet embrace, wind and river, stars and shadows, cradling the renewed passion, intimacy, and emotional connection that had survived storms, confrontation, and revelation. Love, finally, was free to bloom beneath the vast frontier skies, tempered by truth, strengthened by consequence, and unbroken by the trials of the world. The morning rose gently over the prairie, pastel skies spilling soft pinks and gold across dew-kissed grass. The river mirrored the calm, reflecting the first hints of day, quiet and untroubled, as if the land itself exhaled after the storms of the past weeks. Elias stood at the edge of the ridge, boots sinking into cool soil, eyes tracing the horizon where the sky kissed the prairie. Clara emerged from the morning mist, shawl draped loosely across her shoulders, hair glinting in the tender light. There was a serenity about her now, an ease born of resolution, of truth spoken and trust restored. Their gazes met, and in that simple moment, the weight of all that had passed, the secrets, the anger, the revelations, fell away. "Good morning," she whispered, voice soft, trembling with quiet joy. "Morning," he replied, voice low, warm, carrying the echo of nights beneath moonlight, beneath stars, beneath silver skies that had watched their love unfold. They approached each other slowly, hands brushing, hearts sinking, the air between them charged yet tender. Every step they took toward one another was deliberate, deliberate as the prairie wind tracing the tall grasses, as the river's flow over smooth stones. Desire no longer whispered. It settled quietly between them, steady, insistent, a warm ember that refused to fade. Clara lifted her hand to his cheek, thumb brushing along the line of his jaw. "We've weathered everything," she murmured, eyes glistening. "And still we're here." Elias took her hand, pressing it to his chest, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his. "Yes," he said, voice husky, thick with emotion. "Here, always here." The morning carried them to the riverbank, where sunlight spilled in golden pools, warming stones and reeds alike. Elias lowered himself onto the soft grass, Clara beside him, their hands entwined, fingers interlacing as though binding their hearts together with silent promise. They spoke little at first, letting the river's soft murmur fill the space between them. But the quiet was intimate, a shared acknowledgement that all past storms had led them to this fragile, perfect calm. "You were brave," Clara whispered finally, voice breaking slightly. "Through the revelations, the anger, through everything." "And you," he replied, pressing his lips gently to the back of her hand. "You were brave too. Your honesty, your courage, it brought us here." Desire hummed beneath the surface, tempered by trust and understanding. Elias brushed a hand along her arm, fingers tracing the warmth of her skin. Clara leaned into him, sighing softly, letting the gentle heat of shared connection replace the chill of past uncertainty. The hours drifted as they walked along the river, the morning light casting long, soft shadows across the prairie. Birds called from distant trees, the river rippled with quiet motion, and the world seemed paused, holding its breath for two hearts that had survived exposure, confrontation, and doubt. They sat beneath the wide sky, sharing stories of dreams yet to be fulfilled, of days they would ride together across the plains, of nights beneath silver moons, of mornings like this, where calm and desire intertwined. Each glance, each gentle touch, reaffirmed the bond forged in secrecy, tested by turmoil, and now strengthened by truth and love. Clara's lips brushed his cheek in a soft, lingering kiss. Elias captured her hand, lifting it to his lips, pressing a vow into every tender contact. "Forever," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "Forever," she echoed, leaning against his shoulder, warmth pressing into his chest, heartbeat syncing with his. They explored the quiet intimacy of the morning together, hands and lips tracing familiar lines, eyes lingering, smiles exchanged without words. Desire was no longer frantic or secretive. It was steady, patient, a flame nurtured by honesty, deep understanding, and the freedom to love without fear. The sun rose higher, spilling soft light over the river and prairie, igniting dew into 1,000 scattered sparks, and the world seemed to shine in harmony with their hearts. Every glance held recognition of survival, of love weathered, of passion refined into trust and tenderness. Elias brushed hair from Clara's face, lips pressing a gentle trail along her temple. Down her cheek, a soft, lingering kiss that spoke of both desire and devotion. Clara leaned into him, eyes closing, breath mingling, letting intimacy flow freely, delicate yet undeniable. Time passed unnoticed. The prairie stretched infinite around them, vast and patient, cradling their shared moments, echoing the rhythm of hearts that had learned the power of honesty, the resilience of love, and the beauty of trust reclaimed. Finally, they rose, hands still intertwined, shadows falling long across the golden grass. They walked side by side, quiet words and soft laughter threading through the morning, carrying with them the promise of days ahead, days filled with shared work, quiet intimacy, and the enduring fire of love that had survived every test. Elias paused on the ridge, Clara beside him, the river gleaming below like silver ribbon. He drew her close, forehead resting against hers, breath mingling. No matter the storms, the world, the shadows, he whispered, "This us, it's unbreakable." Clara's lips curved into a smile, eyes glinting with the soft light of dawn. "Always," she replied, voice trembling with joy and certainty. They rode together across the prairie, horse hooves striking rhythm against soft earth, wind carrying laughter, whispers, and the quiet music of hearts in harmony. Desire, passion, and tender intimacy flowed freely now, untainted by fear, strengthened by trials, solidified by trust. The river shimmered, the grass bent gently beneath the breeze, and the prairie held witness to a love both fragile and enduring. Their hands brushed constantly, lips met in soft, lingering touches, eyes held in silent promise. Every heartbeat, every glance, every breath spoke of intimacy, desire, and connection that had survived storms and emerged refined, radiant, unshakable. As the sun climbed higher, spilling warmth across the horizon, Elias and Clara paused atop a gentle rise. They turned to face the wide expanse of prairie, shoulders brushing, fingers entwined, hearts synchronized. The world stretched endlessly before them, vast and open, a mirror to the love that had grown from whispered secrets into enduring devotion. Elias tilted her chin, lips meeting hers in a final, slow kiss, carrying the promise of forever, the quiet culmination of desire and trust nurtured through fire and shadow. Clara leaned fully into him, sighing softly, lips curving into a smile, warmth spreading through every part of her. The prairie wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying with it the sense of river, earth, and sage. Above them, the sky stretched infinite, soft pastels blending into light gold, reflecting the calm and joy of hearts that had found their way through storms and emerged whole. They rode on together, side by side, horse hooves striking rhythm with the pulse of their hearts, through valleys and along rivers, across endless plains. Desire hummed steadily beneath the surface, intimacy threaded through every touch and glance, and love, once stolen in secrecy and tested in fire, now flourished openly under the silent witness of the prairie sky. On the frontier, hearts met beneath endless skies, and love bloomed quietly, carried on the wind forever. A secret kiss had ignited a fire. Trials had fanned it into a steady flame, unbreakable, tender, and luminous. The prairie held witness to desire, to intimacy, to connection that defied fear and embraced trust, leaving its mark like sunlight across the open plains. A love daring, enduring, and free. And as they rode into the horizon, the river murmuring beside them, the wind singing through the grass, the world seemed to exhale, holding its breath for the quiet triumph of hearts finally united.